Let's read some psukim. Page 985, if you want to follow along. Let's listen. Page 985, 984 in the Hebrew. 8:11. Ches Yud Aleph. Hishamar lecha pen tishkach es Hashem Elokecha. Be careful. Don't forget Hashem your God. Levilti shmor mitzvaysav, that you to keep His commandments, umishpatav, and His laws, v'chukosav, and His statutes. Asher anaychi mitzam chayim, that which I command you today. Pein teichal v'savata, lest you eat and be satiated. Ubatim tayve tivne v'yashafta, and you build big houses for yourself and you dwell in them. Uvakarcha v'tzoncha yirbiyun, you'll get a lot of animals and a lot of flocks. V'kasav v'zov yirbalach, and you'll become very wealthy. V'chol asher lecha yirba, and everything that you have will increase. What's going to happen? Things are going well. You got enough money to support yourself. You have some nice investments. Maybe you could buy that yacht. You could buy the condo in Miami. What does the Torah warn us? Be careful lest you become haughty. Your heart becomes high. And you forget the Lord your God. That took you out of the land of Egypt, from the house of slavery, that took you through this awesome big desert, with all the serpents and scorpions, and there was no water, and He brought water from a rock. What? Moshe? He was talking about Hashem was the one who did it. Moshe was the one who physically did it, but it was obviously from Hashem.
They found the rock.
Really?
I think so, yeah.
Who says?
They found a rock with a split in the middle, and that water came out of it.
Yeah, really? That's pretty cool. Could be. Okay. So, it's very easy. I shouldn't say it's very easy, but it's easier sometimes to think about Hashem and trust in Hashem when things aren't going that well. When your person is poor, when he's sick, when he's having various life difficulties. But when people are very wealthy, it's not so easy sometimes to think about God. I read a study once that actually, lahavdil, the Catholic Church they're not doing so well in North America, in Europe, first world countries, but in South America they're actually doing quite well. They have a lot more people coming to church. But people in North America and Europe, where it's more affluent, people don't go to church anymore. Why? Because they don't need it. They forgot God. Lahavdil. They feel like they don't need Hashem. Yep. Okay, let's look at page 984. Oh, same page. There's a pasuk later, a very famous pasuk, which is a big lesson in life. I should have just kept reading straight. It says in a few lines, remember, you should remember Hashem your God. Hashem is the one who gives you strength. To win victories, to fight. To establish His covenant which He swore to your forefathers. That is not the pasuk I meant to read. I meant to read, that's a good pasuk, very important. But I meant to read a couple psukim before. Hashem fed you from the desert, which your fathers did not know, in order to oppress you, in order to test you. The man was to test you. So that He should do good for you in the end. And that you should say, if you say, that you say in your heart that my strength and the strength of my arm is what made us successful, what made all this wealth. People have a tendency when things are going well to say, wow, look at me. I'm so accomplished. I'm so powerful. I am so great. I can do anything. This is a classic Yetzer Hara, a classic technique that the Yetzer Hara tries to get us to forget Hashem. It's something we always have to be looking out for. That when we're successful, we think that we're the ones who are responsible for our own success and not Hashem. If you look around, you see that there are some very strong and intelligent people that are not so successful, and there are some very weak people and very not so intelligent people that are very successful, and they do very well for themselves, which seems like luck. You don't need to look too far around in the modern day world to see where to prove the philosophy is incorrect. We can never place our success in our own our own strength. Look what happened on October 7th. Israel had $1 billion fence, one of the mightiest armies in the world, and it was breached by a bunch of, trying to think of the best adjective, besides losers, not good enough, murderous, morons, idiots, sand dwellers, but they were able to breach this $1 billion fence. If you put your 7:30, if you put your strength in yourself, that's what happens. Or look at the Secret Service on when Trump. Look at that. You have literally the Secret Service is a $2 billion funded agency. You have the might of the United States government behind them, and you have all the training. I've read about the training they go through and all the tactical stuff they do. They're supposed to be experts. And then you have some 22-year-old skinny punk that's able to climb a roof and almost kill the ex-president. So a person, and this is true on a personal level, on a national level, we can't say that our success is from our own power, because it's not. It's all from Hashem. Now, we just read that the manna, the man, was a test from Hashem. What was the test of the manna? What was the test of the man? So it's specifically this issue. The Sforno says that the man came down every day. We did not have to work for it. So that's akin, it's better to having a very nice 401k that you can live off the interest. You know, you're getting $1 million interest every year from your investments, and you don't have to worry about anything. That was the man. You don't have to worry about making a living. What did they do in the desert for 40 years? They sat and they studied Torah. They didn't have to worry about making a living, anything else. So the test was, when everything's going well for you, and you have all of your needs provided for you, are you still going to recognize Hashem, and are you still going to recognize that everything comes from God, that you're doing very well, and your success, though, isn't because of yourself, rather it's because of Hashem. Now, the Mesilas Yesharim warns us that this is actually one of the tests of life. One of the tests of life is success. Right? We usually don't think like this. We think a test of life is, which is true, is also a test. I'm very poor. Am I going to cut corners at my job to make a little more money, to swindle somebody, to steal the bread from the windowsill? Whatever it is, that's a test. A person's poor, is not going well. Is he going to cheat? But there's also a test of being successful, of being very wealthy. What's that test? Says in Mesilas Yesharim chapter 1. If you haven't learned Mesilas Yesharim 25 times, you should start. V'nimtza. I haven't either. But what?
Learned a little.
Learned a little?
Yeah.
Learned the whole thing 25 times. I have to learn the whole thing again and again. He writes. Can't understand it, so let's learn it together. We'll learn it together. Mesilas Yesharim says that he's not writing. The purpose of his book is that people should go over again and again and again when he's writing, because the things are so important, and really deep down we know everything he's saying is true, but we have to constantly go over it again and again and again so that we make it a part of ourselves. But he writes in the first chapter, V'nimsa, Shumusim ve'emes b'toichem l'chama ha'chazaka. A human being in his life is in the midst of a great war. You're a warrior. You're a general in the army. Sivas Hashem. Everything in the world, whether good or evil, is a test for a person. Just like being poor is a test, so too being wealthy is a test. Now, even those of us in America who are poor, compared to human beings throughout world history, we're pretty rich. You know, compared to the people that were living in like the 12th century in Western Europe in the Middle Ages, and died when they were 25. We're doing pretty well. Not to downplay anyone's nisyonis, but Inin she'amar Shlomo, like King Solomon says, "Pen eshba v'chichashti," lest I become satiated and forget Hashem. V'amarti mi Hashem, and I say, who is Hashem? U'pen yivarish v'ganafti, unless I become poor and I steal. Hashav mitzarecha ve'yisur mitzarecha. Someone who lives a difficult life, let's say a person's very sick, he has cancer, that's a tremendous test to keep a person to keep his faith in Hashem when he's experiencing those difficulties. But on the other hand, if a person doesn't have any difficulties during his life, that's also a test. Because why? He could forget Hashem. That the war is on every side. And then he says, Mesilas Yesharim continues here, that if a person is strong and he's prepared to fight this battle, he'll be successful. in this war. And I think I saw quoted today from Rabbi Goldberg from Telz, I think he is, wrote a statement on this Illush Sharm. I think he cites the Rabbeinu Yonah that says actually the test of being wealthy and secure is a harder test than poverty. You're right. Right? We usually don't. Okay, everyone's good.
Okay. Is Shalom safe?
Shalom is fine. Shalom is fine. Yeah. So, since the purpose of life is serving Hashem and getting close to Hashem, he's saying that affluence is actually a greater deterrent, or can be.
You didn't get startled.
You got me nervous.
You got me nervous too.
The challenge fine. The challenge okay.
No, I think you got ruined.
Unacceptable.
I think milk's falling to it.
I'm sure it's fine.
Your shirt's watered down. Your shirt's watered down.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So now, right. So we're saying that being comfortable and talking to all of us in our lives, we have it pretty good. In the United States in 2024, even with all the mishigas going on, even with the rising anti-Semitism, even with all the problems we have, we got it pretty good. It's pretty good. So it's very easy in those situations to forget Hashem. I know my own life, when things are more difficult, I find it much easier to daven. I find it much easier to connect to Hashem. But when things are going well, and I'm like, okay, I don't feel like going to davening now, I'm in a rush, you don't focus as much. So how do we do that? How do we combat the complacency of affluence and everything going well? So I saw a quote from the Or Chaim that something you could do is recognize the benefits that Hashem gives us. Because forgetting that Hashem runs the world, that's the first step to idolatry. When we start thinking that I'm responsible for my own success, that I'm responsible that things are going well, I'm responsible that I have enough money to support myself, and I'm responsible for my own health because I run every day and I eat well, and it's because of me. When that happens, that's the first step leading actually to idolatry and to abandoning Hashem. So when a person stops, especially during davening, and says, thank you Hashem, I recognize that everything is coming from you, and when we recognize that, that's the first step in doing that. Another step is actually also in this week's parsha. This week's parsha says, Ve'achalta v'savakta u've'rachta, a Torah mitzvah that many of us don't focus on enough. Benching is actually a mitzvah from the Torah. It's funny, sometimes we focus more on parts of davening that are only rabbinic, Shemona Esrei, but benching is a Torah commandment. We thank Hashem for all the food that we had. We're recognizing that Hashem, you're the reason that I'm able to eat this right now. You provided me. It could be that I have the same abilities and the same whatever, but I wouldn't be successful if it wasn't that Hashem wanted me to be successful. The Kutzker says that Abraham, when he would bring everybody into his tent, all the idolaters that he wanted to teach the world about Hashem, how did he teach them about Hashem? He had them bench. He would give them some food and he had them bench. And after they benched, he would teach them how to bench and thank God for the food. Showing the appreciation to Hashem and thanking Hashem was how they came to recognize Him. So I saw a nice mashal, a nice parable from David Ashir. His family says there was a poor man. He was invited to a very fancy wedding of his cousin, spritzy wedding. Not in pick some. Used to be in my day growing up here. It was the Grand Marquis. That was like all the fancy bar mitzvahs. Yeah. I was at a bar mitzvah there once, and it wasn't kosher, and like they served octopus for dessert. At a bar mitzvah. So that's the only bar mitzvah I've ever been to where octopus was served, and even if I didn't keep kosher at the time, I don't find that appealing at all. It's the most disgusting thing ever. I'm pretty like Ursula from eating Ursula from the Little Mermaid or something. But anyway, he says, imagine you're invited to this super duper fancy wedding. And you're very poor, so you have to borrow. So you go to your neighbor. You say, "Listen, I have to go to this wedding." So you borrow money. You borrow $1,000 to get a fancy suit because you have to look presentable at your wealthy cousin's, wedding. Your wealthy cousins from LA or something or another place. So you get this. You get $1,000. You go to Barney's. Is it still around? Barney's suit store.
No.
No. Get a fancy suit, $1,000 suit. You're very careful. You look sharp. You walk in, you feel like $1 million. And then you start looking over. You go, oh, look at that guy's suit. That's a cheap suit he's wearing. And look at that guy. Oh, look, he's got stains on his shirt. What is this guy? And you start looking down at everyone. It's ridiculous. You borrowed money to get the suit. It's not yours. So that's the way we have to look at our possessions and look at everything and our success. Right? Our success isn't ours. We didn't do it. Hashem gave it to us. He says, the Chassam Sofer says, the Gemara says, I'll start with the Gemara. It says, Hakol b'dei Shemayim chutz mi Yireh Shemayim. Everything is from Hashem. Everything that happens to a person is from God, except when it comes to Yireh Shemayim. Meaning, except when he decides if he's going to do a mitzvah or an avera. And with the level that his fear of heaven is at. A person's level of his fear of heaven is the only thing he can determine. And the Chassam Sofer goes a step further. He says, even fear of heaven is actually determined by Hashem. Meaning that all a person can do is make the decision that he's going to try to do mitzvahs and try to do averos, and he's going to try to daven that he should be successful, and he's going to try to come to a fear of Hashem. But whether he's going to be successful even that's from Hashem. We don't sit and think and appreciate all the goodness that we have in our lives, and that all of that goodness comes from God. When we recognize that all of that goodness comes from God, that's the first way of undoing that attitude that the Torah warns us against of koichi ve'otzim yadi, that my strength and the strength of my arm made us successful. And I saw they say also the word otzem, kochem ve'otzim yadi, so it means really the strength of his arm here. But it says otzem is also a lashon of to hide. That we come to say that we are strong when the fact that Hashem is really the one who did it for us is hidden from us. That's when we have an issue. Dennis, we're saying that we're hidden when we hide from the fact that Hashem is the one who makes us successful. That's when we say that we're the ones in charge. And when we say that we're the ones in charge, that's the beginning of starting to do averos and starting to forget Hashem. Okay. So Rav Melech Biederman shared a story. We're talking about benching. So one of the ways to do that is to bench. It's to bench, to thank Hashem. Because He's the one that provided us from all the food. Oh, Rabbi Russell, there's cholent in there for you, if you'd like. So, I'd like to share a story. Rav Melech Biederman shared a story. There was a fellow, he was an old Jew in Yerushalayim, Rav Shimon, and he grew up in Europe. And when he was a young man, he met Rav Meir Shapiro. Rav Meir Shapiro used to test the boys, and if they did well, he would give them candy. But he tested this boy, this Rav Meir, when he was a young man, and he didn't have any candy to give him. So he said, boys, I'm really sorry, I don't have any candy, but I'm going to give you something better than candy. I'm going to give you a segula for a tranquil life, to have a peaceful life. He said, if you're careful in benching, if you're careful when you say Birkas Hamazon after you eat, I promise you that you'll have a tranquil life. Okay. And I promise you that you'll be successful and you'll be protected. Now, that was in the 1930s, 1920s, before the Holocaust, and the Holocaust happened. So he used to say, this Rav Shimon used to say, from his whole life, he was always very careful in benching. And he always used to say, Hashem, please protect me in the merit that I benched well, that I focused on benching. Because when we're benching, we're thanking Hashem, we're recognizing that everything comes from Him, everything comes from God. So the first thing that happened was he was in the line, the selection gas chambers of the work camp, and he was very short, and the short guys were going to the gas chambers. So he stood on his toes. He got through. The next, they were looking for people with jobs. They wanted people in the camps with jobs. So he didn't know what he was going to say. He's a teenager. He didn't have a job. So the guy behind him says, why don't you say you're the cook and I'm your helper? 7:30, just make sure. Very good. Let's finish the story. He says, say you're the cook and that I'm your helper. Okay, so he said he's the cook. So they put him in the kitchen. And they believed him. He wasn't really the cook. Now, because of that, since he was the cook, he always had enough food in the camps. One day he was out of the camp, and the sadistic Nazi said, hey, boy, dig a pit here, whatever the measurements were. It was a stony area. He gave him a little tiny shovel. If you don't dig a pit by these measurements in 2 hours, I'm going to kill you. Now, there was no way that he could do that in time. So he just said, Hashem, please protect me in the merit that I bench. So he's trying to dig and dig. First, a jeep of Nazis come by and they throw vegetables at him. Whatever, not going so well, just throw vegetables. And then, a few minutes later, there were some Russian POWs. They were also in the camp. And the Russian POWs said, hey, give us those vegetables, we're starving. So the boy is very smart. He said, I'll give you them. I can't just give them to you. Dig a pit here, and then I'll give you the vegetables. And because of that, they dug the pit. The Nazis didn't kill him, and he gave him the vegetables, and the Nazi couldn't believe it. He says, I know your God protects you, but I didn't know he protects you this much. And he always credited, I should have said this before, in the camps, he was always careful to bench, in the concentration camps. And if he thought that after eating, he wasn't going to be able to bench, he wouldn't eat in the first place. And he always used to say, please, Hashem, protect me in the merit that I'm careful for benching. And after all these times where he was careful in benching, this story is what the Nazis happened, throwing vegetables at him and digging the pit, and he was successful. Then later on, he was saved. He went to Israel. He had a successful parnasa. He married off all of his kids and lived a very happy life. But why? We're saying, why is benching so important? We're saying benching is so important because we recognize, really all brachas, all davening, but especially benching, we're recognizing that our sustenance, our parnasa, it comes all from Hashem. It's all from Hashem. And when we live with that attitude, and when we constantly think about that and make it part of us, we don't say that we're the ones responsible for our own success. And that's the way a Jew should live. A Jew should always recognize and believe that it's Hashem is the one who's in charge, and it's Hashem who's providing him with all of the good things in life. And we should all be zeicha to that attitude and to all of those physical sustenances and spiritual sustenances. Shkaya. Better, some challenge in there for you.